We move ahead to the next presentation, that's on ventricular tachycardia storm. How to manage? May I invite Dr. Jayakirti Yoga Narasimha Rao. He is a senior consultant electrophysiologist at MaxCure Hospitals from Hyderabad in Telangana. And Dr. Rao would be deliberating for the next 11 minutes. Dr. Rao, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and the respected chairpersons. And at the outset, let me thank the organizers for having me here. And well, I don't know whether this topic is appropriate for the audience here, but I'm very happy that very few are here, because most of the others, I presume, are into their spiritual, awakening. So I hope they're all taking trainings on how to meditate. So then I'm very happy. So Madam would agree with me, yes. I'm here basically for the spiritual part of it, but then I thought, okay, let me use this. The topic for today is how to manage VT storms or electrical storms. So I'll jump into it. What is an electrical storm? Most commonly used definition is 3 or more distinct sustained VT episodes or VF episodes within a 24-hour period. And how common is it? It's quite common, especially in patients who already have an implanted defibrillator. And the incidence varies. This is a little old, but about 25 to 30% is what is the incidence now. What are the causes of an electrical storm? Most common cause is ischemia. It's myocardial causes like ischemia, old scars, or any other structural heart disease, and followed by metabolic or other causes like including drugs, which are proarrhythmic, especially class 1 drugs, followed by class 3, and also digoxin. What are the types of ventricular arrhythmias encountered in electrical storm? Again, a large majority of them are due to monomorphic ventricular tachycardia, and almost up to the tune of 90%, followed by VF and polymorphic VT. When we see VF, that's ventricular fibrillation, or polymorphic VT, we need to think of metabolic or drug as an underlying cause, and rather than re-entry. So what is monomorphic ventricular tachycardia? As the name explains, this is a ventricular tachycardia with one morphology. So the shape does not change beat to beat, and as is obvious, it's pretty stable there. And how does ventricular fibrillation appear? This is just a cavitic activity of the myocardium without any significant forward flow of blood. So this is when most of the patients collapse. And polymorphic VT, as already shown here, changes axis, either it twists around a point that's called the torsade de Pont, and there are many causes, especially channelopathies like long QT, etc., or even drugs like digoxin can cause this. When you see a monomorphic VT, please think of a re-entry. That means there is probably a scar which is giving rise to such an arrhythmia. Whereas when you see VF or polymorphic VT, we should think of triggered activity or automaticity and after depolarization as a mechanism. Now, let me just take you through a few cases and the strategies I have used. These are all real cases. So in the end, I'll summarize everything. Case 1, a 47-year-old gentleman who had undergone a primary angioplasty 2 weeks ago before this presentation with VT storm. He had severe LV dysfunction, and amiodarone was promptly started. He was cardioverted, multiple episodes, almost like an incessant ventricular arrhythmia, and then beta blocker dose was limited by heart failure. So at this point, we were pushed to the wall. We said, okay, let us sedate him completely, and we attached him to a ventilator. And the next thing is patient stopped having VTs because we withdrew the sympathetic surge that is associated with many of these events. So we then placed an ICD, which is seen here on the X-ray. There's the ICD lead. And then patient was sent home with beta blocker and amiodarone. Case 2, a 54-year-old lady who already had an ICD for 8 years for a suspected case diagnosis of ARVC, that's arrhythmogenic right ventricular dysplasia. 8 years, everything was fine, and as Dr. Joy showed, one fine day, she comes with 67 episodes of VTVF and 27 shocks, and the battery was exhausted. And to confound the matters, she also had a recalled lead, that's called a Riata lead, which had some mechanical and electrical issues with it, and so the US FDA had recalled. And so what did I do? We replaced the battery and also had to put a second lead. And after this, she was also placed on amiodarone, beta blocker, and potassium supplements. 2 months follow-up, she has no more episodes of VT and no PVCs, which were frequent earlier. So third strategy was ischemic cardiomyopathy in a relatively young man who was on ICD for 7 months. Again, he landed up with syncope with injury and 19 episodes of VT. He was already on amiodarone and beta blocker, so there was nothing much that we can do with regards to drug therapy. So I did a bailout radio frequency ablation. This is catheter ablation, which was successful, and I'll show some studies to prove it. It has a large body of evidence, and at 1 year, there are no further episodes of VT in him. Now, another category of patients, 15-year-old girl, history of fever 1 week ago, sudden onset of breathlessness in 2 days. ECG showed a sustained ventricular tachycardia. So echo showed severe LV dysfunction, not responding to any drugs. Lidocaine was tried, amiodarone was tried. She was already on a ventilator. She was in fact in shock, incessant VT. So we also started on ECMO for her. And well, the VT was not going away. So what did we do? We injected lidocaine. This is a temporary measure. It lasts only about 2 hours. Bupivacaine lasts longer, and the definitive sympathetic block is through surgery. So what we did was a cervical sympathetic block, and there was instant termination of ventricular tachycardia. There's another strategy. Last case is a 74-year-old gentleman, ischemic cardiomyopathy, severe LV dysfunction. Secondary prevention ICD was placed just a month ago. He was already on amiodarone and also all the other heart failure drugs. And 1 month later, he was pushed to shock by shocks, some 40 plus shocks, and then he succumbed to his illness, probably because I was out of station. So when I came back, I realized he was no more and they could not manage him. Not that I'm a hero, but as electrophysiologists, we can do something, I always feel. So why do we need to treat electrical storm? There's just one study. There's enough body of evidence to show that electrical storm is associated with not only a short-term mortality risk, whereas even in the long term, it's quite considerable. The hazard ratio varies from 2.5 to 7 times compared to a patient who does not have an electrical storm. So what are the options that we have when a patient presents to us with an electrical storm? Deep sedation, like in the first case, and ventilate the patient. So I say that knock the patient down before the VT knocks him down. I mean, aggression is everything, like the United States, They go bombarding everybody, presuming that it's dangerous. So like that. They may survive with a VT storm, but it's better that we take some precaution. So drugs, but which ones? What do the studies say? I've just quoted one. When they have compared beta blockers, this is bisoprolol and carvedilol, with sotalol and also amiodarone and a beta blocker combination, it was convincingly shown that there was a significant mortality benefit with amiodarone and beta blocker. What if the drugs don't act or drugs don't work? We are faced with multiple other options, and catheter ablation has the largest body of evidence. We usually use 3D mapping to get over the procedure. Then is the cervical sympathetic denervation. As in one of our ladies who had a Riata lead extraction was the right choice, but she did not consent, so I did not pull it out. Renal denervation again is a promising intervention coming up. And when you find a patient in shock with severe LV dysfunction, ECMO is a good option which gives you some time to get over the crisis. Now, data supporting the role of catheter ablation. Catheter ablation has been suggested as a method of choice for the management of electrical storm. It's very effective in the suppression of acute suppression of storms. often represents a life-saving therapy. In the long term, it prevents recurrences of any VT in about 50% of treated patients. You may wonder what 50% when a patient has come like this. This, if you carefully see, is of any VT, whereas electrical storm is prevented in up to 90% of patients. So this was the case on a young gentleman which I did. His ECG showed one morphology of ventricular tachycardia. On the table, I induced 3 more morphologies of ventricular tachycardia. So this is how it is. The patient already has an ICD in place, and I go in with my catheters trying to do a 3D mapping. This is the 3D map of the left ventricle. This is the normal size of the left ventricle. This guy had such a massive heart attack that an equal size of aneurysm was found. So I did the gray area represents a scar. So I burnt around the scar and isolated the entire area from the normal myocardium. And this is the guy at 1 year, he's having no more episodes of VT. And this again, one of the articles to show that ICD leads themselves can cause uncontrollable VT until the lead is extracted. That means the placing an ICD is not always a solution, it's a beginning of a problem also. So either electrical or mechanical effects. So removal of these ICD leads is the only way out. Cardiac sympathetic denervation, as shown in one of our patients, it can wither the storm. And already said, in the long term, especially surgically, this is a permanent, a sort of a permanent cure. Bilateral cardiac sympathetic denervation has been shown to be effective in a large percent of patients over 3 to 5 year periods. So where is it done? It can also be done through, as we did in our case, we inject lidocaine or bupivacaine, and I'll not go into the details of the procedure. Renal denervation is very interesting. The heart and the kidney are friends, and when you have friends, you can always call them in to help out. And renal denervation definitely offers a promising, safe, and effective therapy in cases of ventricular storms when all other therapies fail. So, ladies and gentlemen, to summarize, generous sedation and ventilation helps. Optimize the drug therapy, add amiodarone and beta blocker, that's good. Thoughtful programming of the device, because most of these VT-VF episodes last less than 30 seconds, or you can prolong detection of these and prevent unwanted shocks, because even ICD shocks, they are life-saving, yes, but they also lead on to worse mortality. So you can program the device accordingly. Catheter ablation in the absence of reversible trigger, and consider cardiac sympathetic denervation and renal denervation early. And ECMO is life-saving in hypotensive patients, and it gives you a window to manage patients with electrical storm. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Sir, we enjoyed your topic. The question is very simple. Is the denervation of the carotid sympathectomy and the renal denervation are done bilaterally, or they could be done in sequential manner?
Well, unilateral versus bilateral with regards to hypertension is being tried. And after the Simplicity trial, the people who are investigating this unilateral versus bilateral have slowed down. Whereas, we should be proud of Kalyanam Shivkumar, who is in the US, UCLA, who has been the lead investigator with many of these cardiac sympathectomy, sympathetic denervation trials. And he has shown, his trial was actually what I showed somewhere before. He has done it bilateral. The problem is unilateral. What is advised is left-sided ganglionectomy. But they have shown that these nerves do regenerate. So they said, okay, why not bilateral? And why bilateral? Well, right side also innervates, but right side predominantly innervates the sinus node. So for a long time it was neglected. But he has very clearly shown that it was a group of about 60 odd patients, that bilateral is much better, and up to 90% at 3 to 5 years are free of VT storms. So bilateral, I think, is the way forward. With regards to renal denervation, I think it's the same way there. Because most of the time these things regenerate. So you better achieve something better at the first instance itself.
Okay. Well, if there aren't any...
Yeah, there's one.
Sir, we as practicing physicians, clinic-based physicians, we have to refer most of the patients, say Escorts or anywhere, and we find most of the times even 30-35% ejection fraction. Those patients who may do well, as our experience goes as MD physicians, they are given an ICD, and these side effects, as you said, the multiple shocks, the endocarditis, which was elaborated by madam, and a lot of other things. So, you know, what should be the real ejection fraction if the patient is stable on medical treatment, anti-anginals are working well, even if TVD is there, anti-anginals are working well with us. So are we to blame if we don't get an ICD put in at 30%, the patient is doing well, even 20% patients are doing quite well and they cannot afford an ICD or any other combo device. So what is your suggestion to
the
us
point
as
is very
basic
relevant. The
physicians?
point is extremely relevant from 2 points of view. One is scientific, one is financial. As Dr. Joy mentioned, for us in our country to place a primary prevention ICD is, I consider, I'm on the more conservative side, I think it's quite criminal. Somebody has enough money to throw around, or he values his life that he can, I mean, let me not go into it, but I think we should not be suggesting ICD for primary prevention to all and sundry. We need to be very selective as responsible physicians, okay? Because as doctors, we are socialists as well. Now, next, whether we implant, 35 is the right cutoff. It's proven beyond doubt, okay? Now, whether we implant an ICD or not, this is very relevant when it comes to CRT devices, heart failure devices as well. CRT-P versus CRT-D. So even in the West, well, I have a post-graduation in heart failure, so that's how I go a little bit more into it. So they have started, if you are dealing with an obvious ischemic heart disease, there's not much to think about. CRT-D is a better choice. Whereas when it comes to a non-ischemic cardiomyopathy, it's worthwhile the patient spends about 10,000 more rupees, and we get an idea how much the scar burden is. If the scar burden, according to various studies, is above 9%, 16% or whatever it is, if it is significant, then CRT-D is preferable. It does help to have a defibrillator on. If it is very minimal scar or no scar, CRT-P does the same job. Why so? Because these patients respond well, and once their ejection fraction improves, the risk of sudden cardiac death also comes down. So we as physicians should individualize to an extent possible.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr.